Police officers, what's the dumbest reason you've been called to a scene? I was dispatched to a house referenced a reported vandalism to a vehicle. When I got there, the guy who called was standing by his car. I saw that there was no visible damage to his vehicle. His complaint was that dust picked by the wind was coming from his neighbor's yard and landing on his car. The guy actually wanted to file a criminal complaint. My first thought was maybe I was dreaming this nonsense. All I could do in response was stare at him, and I said absolutely nothing. The guy became uncomfortable and explained his complaint again. I couldn't help but just stare at him. At the time, I didn't think I could say anything to him that didn't sound insulting. I think he finally got it, since he just went inside his house and never called us again. Next story. I was an intern with my local police department for about 4 months. Small town, about 10,000 people. Here's a list of stupid calls we got. 1. Old woman couldn't back out of her driveway, asked for an officer to help spot her. 2. Woman couldn't find out how to turn off her dryer, was worried about flooding. 3. Old man's alarm clock went off and couldn't figure out how to turn it off, and was physically unable to bend down to unplug it. 4. 17-year-old girl asked if there was traffic in town. That one kinda pissed me off. 5. Old woman literally just asked for an officer to come over. Turns out she just wanted someone to talk to. And you know what? For each of these calls, an officer was sent over to assist. A lot of people don't like cops, and sometimes it's deserved. But for the most part, cops are just normal citizens who want to help people. Next story. At the apartment tower I work security for, some Saudi royal family members called the cops because the hooker they hired took the money and ran. Cops said, sure, you can have the money back, but you have to admit a misdemeanor solicitation to do so. Before people ask, their cars had KSA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, license plates and the Saudi royal family crest on it. Also, they admitted to what they did to the cops, so in order for the cops to take the theft report, they would have to include the solicitation report. Cops gave them a break by letting them all go. Edit. For everyone wondering, yes, they have diplomatic immunity. Next story. LEO dispatcher here. A lady called into 911 to report her baby back ribs stole right off that there grill, while another called in to report that a plane was flying low. Do I look like the FAA or Shane's ribs? We dispatched and aired lookouts on both. Deputies called into radio practically crying at 3 a.m. They were laughing so hard. When I confirmed the unit for larceny, she wants her baby back ribs over our radio. Look, you joke about it, but a half rack of ribs these days is quite expensive. I'd be mad if someone stole those from my barbecue grill. Next story. Responded to the outside of the county jail one time, LA County Twin Towers, and had to actually fight a guy trying to climb the fence into the jail. This may not sound like much until you realize we had to fight a guy in order to prevent him from entering the jail, then drive around the back and put him in jail. LA is effing weird. Next story. Soon-to-be police officer here. When I was doing an internship at the local sheriff's office, I was with one deputy and we got called out on a domestic disturbance. Before we could get there, a city police officer intercepted the call and took it. Since it was just outside city limits and we were still 15 minutes away. So we continued to patrol the county when the same people called again, specifically asking for a deputy to come out to the scene. We get there and right off the bat, this woman is going on about how when the city police officer, he was very rude to her and she wanted us to go arrest him and have him fired for unpoliceman-like conduct. I'm not joking. I had to turn away to keep from laughing in this woman's face. She was very angry because he allegedly said the word F in front of her daughter. Keep in mind, this woman was using the F word 3 or 4 times in each sentence. We pretty much told her that our department doesn't police other departments and that she should contact the chief of police and make a formal complaint. This did not sit well with her, and she told us we needed to leave before she called the cops. Again, not joking. At this point, the guy I was with couldn't take it anymore and told the woman that he was arresting himself and taking himself downtown, and we left trying not to bust out laughing. If everything goes right, I'll have some more stories once I get hired by the sheriff's office. Next story. So many. A woman found a half-eaten sandwich in her unfenced backyard. She thinks someone threw it there to poison her dog. She saved the sandwich and wanted us to test it for poison. A man called because his trampoline was blowing away in a windstorm. One woman called because someone stole her American flag from her front yard. One of those little tiny yard flags that are about 1 foot tall and plant in your grass. She called the morning after a particularly bad and windy thunderstorm. I had to explain to her that it's much more likely that the flag blew away than someone maliciously stole a 50-cent flag. I then found it in a nearby sewer drain. My dog is acting strange. Can you send a police officer? Happens more than you'd think. My favorite is people who call in because people are driving too fast through the neighborhoods. So we go out there and run radar. 9 times out of 10, the person caught speeding is the person who called in the complaint to begin with. Next story. Worked for the local newspaper, and we got to read all the calls to the cops. The most hilarious one was from a woman who called in to report a man driving around in his van, playing loud music and luring kids. When the cops showed up, it was the ice cream man. I wish I was making this up. Some people are just nosy busybodies. Next story. Gonna get buried, but once a lady called us claiming that her neighbor was threatening her. As it turned out, she claimed that her neighbor was plotting a terrorist attack. How did she figure this out? She had been going up to his property and looking into her Middle Eastern neighbor's windows and noticed he had a prayer rug in the middle of the room, said he worked odd hours. She was given a stern warning about trespassing onto her neighbor's property and told to stop being such a racist twat. Next story. This may be apropos of nothing, but I called the police once because there was a guy wandering the mall parking lot across the street from my house screaming F as loudly as possible and seemed to be trying to force his way into the mall. I didn't call 911, just police HQ, because it wasn't an emergency. 9 cruisers showed up within 5 minutes. Must have been a slow night. Next story. Officer here, been working 2 years in a large city. The first call that truly made me question my job choice was a disturbance between a husband and a wife. Officers had been out in the house earlier in the day, and the wife called 911 a second time. The wife called and said she and her husband were arguing because she wanted to have sex, but he refused because her private stunk. It is difficult to remain professional. Next story. Once responded to a call originating in the sheriff's department parking lot. Literally walked out of the doors into the following fustercluck. A woman who had just gotten released from jail's ex-girlfriend came to pick her up, drunk, on a moped. The reason it got reported is that the drunk woman was doing donuts in our parking lot waiting for her ex, lost control, and rammed a police car. My training sergeant always had a saying that ran true that day. We don't catch the smart ones. Next story. I'm not a police officer, but I liked a Facebook page where all calls to police for incidents are posted for the county. The center of my hometown is the crossroads of 2 major state highways, and they've slowly been expanding them. Traffic is super congested in town, and I repeatedly see posts like this. Officers called to intersection of 34 and 47 because light is taking too long to change. Or officers called to intersection of 34 and 47 because lights have changed but cars remain stopped. Really, people? This construction has been going on for years, but you're still confused? Next story. Saw a woman threatening to call the police on the staff of a kebab place in my city because other people who had ordered before her were served before her. She then started screaming about how her husband was a lawyer, blah blah, she'll sue, discrimination. She was escorted out by the off-duty cops who were in the place and was seen making a pathetic groveling apology. Spoiled rich female dogs, male and female. Waste of life / good kebab. Yeah, I was gonna say the real casualty and travesty here is that dang kebab that went to waste. What a shame. Next story. I'm not a cop, but a few years ago when I was moving into a house, I was doing most of my moving late at night. The nosy old people across the street kept calling the cops and reporting suspicious activity. The first time the cops showed up, they were prepared for a criminal. Hands on guns, flashlights in my eyes. But by the 4th time, they just BS'd with me and finally told the couple to stop calling the police. I'm not sure what made people think burglars would bring stuff into the house instead of taking it out. Next story. I'm not a cop. About 12 years ago, I was driving home from a friend's house and I saw an injured raccoon in the middle of the road. It had likely been hit by a car and was unable to move, but it was intact and stood a chance of survival if cared for properly. In a benevolent gesture that was out of character for myself at the time, I called 411 to find out the number for animal control and was told that after midnight the police took over for animal control. So I called the police and told them there was a hurt raccoon that needed medical attention. In a voice dripping with sarcasm, the dispatcher told me, "Okay, I'll send an officer out to look at the hurt raccoon." I got the message and took it on myself to wrap the raccoon in a shirt and move it onto the grass. It did not struggle or try to bite. It understood I was trying to help it. In all likelihood, it died on the lawn later that evening, but it didn't get run over. That night, I had a dream where a human-sized raccoon fed me amber liquid. I don't recall having ever tasted scotch before, but I instinctively recognized that that was what I was drinking. The next day, I bought a bottle of scotch, and it was the same flavor for my dream. The bottle was empty by the end of the weekend, and I wasn't sober again for years. I was living under a bridge by the end of it. It took everything in me to overcome the crushing grip of alcoholism, but I finally got my crap together. This April makes 7 years I've been sober. So this is a strangely wholesome and touching story. Pour one out for the raccoon. But no, seriously, glad that you're better now, OP. Next story. So this semester in class, a student had lost the lock for his bike. So he brought it into the classroom and set it against the back wall. This was against the rules because in a 200-person lecture hall, 100 bikes would crowd the room. However, this was a spacious classroom with 20 students. The professor said that he did not mind the bike being there. Well, the professor next door did mind. He saw this guy bringing his bike inside and told him it was against the rules. The student said okay and walked past. Next week, professor sees the bike again and says, "If you bring that bike in here again, I'm calling the police." The student laughs it off and walks past. Next week, during class, there is a knock on the classroom door. 4 police officers had shown up. One had her hand covering her face in embarrassment and said, "We received a call that said there is a bike in here, which is against the rules, making this trespassing. The bike needs to leave or else we have to arrest you." The student said he doesn't have a lock and it'll get stolen. Professor knocks some sense into this kid and tells him to go home, then it's not worth getting arrested over one lecture. In the end, no arrests were made. I don't think there was a fine either. Police officers all had a look saying why we're here and looked embarrassed. The professor who called the police probably got the bad end of that deal, though. The professor whose class was interrupted has a lot of clout at the university and didn't take kindly to the whole situation. Next story. TLDR, our landlord called the police over $2 and a few cigarettes. Backstory. We live in a 3-family home, and our landlord had agreed to rent the upstairs apartment to a couple moving from out of state without meeting them. After getting a good reference about them from the man who was hiring one of them to work for him. They were white trash, loud at all hours, severely underweight, and filthy dog. Smoked in the house, they were told not to do this, and even jimmied the washing machine open to steal quarters. The landlord didn't collect these. The washing machine was just on our neighbor's grid, and they were used to reimburse them for the utilities that we used. We shared a common entryway with these garbage people, and my boyfriend left his jacket out there. In the morning, the last few cigarettes from his pack and $2 were missing. He called the landlord to let him know. At this point, our landlord was desperate to get them out and was trying to build a case. And our landlord called the police. An officer had to come over and take a report. We felt kind of silly. Next story. Paramedic here, and I know these stories are a dime a dozen. They wonder why we burn out. Some favorites. 50-year-old woman to clean up after she defecated on the floor. Call came in as abdominal pain, 2 a.m. of a 20-hour shift. 30-something-year-old who called in the middle of one of the state's worst blizzards in recent memory for cracked hands, aka dry skin. The 5 billion quadrillion drunken homeless calls I respond to a day because they're drunk and denied shelter will come in as chest pain. The man, paraquadriplegic with leg pain, whose motorized wheelchair had died and thus prevented him from getting to the shelter before it was full, would not leave his wheelchair that I can neither lift nor transport. Had to hand push it a mile down the road to the shelter. The man who had been somehow practicing karate at a closed gym tore his labia and was waiting my arrival with 5 bags which I was instructed not to forget. Edit. This dude was also wearing a cheetah bathrobe, pinstripe pajama pants, and had hair like Doc Brown from Back to the Future. The man who was allergic to water and stuck in the rain. The woman who was having trouble seeing because her light bulb blew out. The teenager who made me walk 8 miles off the trails and down a cliff with all my gear, 3 engines, and the state PD because she didn't feel like walking out. Call came in as female feeling weak. To literally transport a dog and its unhurt owner to the hospital because it was close to where they lived and their vehicle was disabled post-MVA. Insert every my neck, my back, my lawyer call. Insert every if I go by ambulance, it'll be faster than waiting at the ED call. Breaking news, I bring you to the waiting room. These are all I can remember right now, but you get the point. Needless to say, I went back to school. Next story. My neighbors have reported the following. Lawn clippings on their sidewalk. Apparently my dad, who was in the hospital, blew the clippings onto their walk. Not having a fence around an above-ground pool and worried their 18-year-old kid is going to drown. Yard has a fence around it, but pool itself doesn't have any barriers. It complies with local bylaws. Our dog barking overnight. We don't have a effing dog, but they do. Our car being parked in our driveway, and they don't have enough room to erect a non-compliant fence. The fence partially falling over because it was installed incorrectly. Having a fire in legal fire pit, worried it's going to burn their house down, which is 40 plus feet away. Having our camper parked in the driveway and not being able to see out their window. The only thing they can see out that window is the outside wall of our house and a tree. I have dumb effing neighbors. This isn't even everything, just what I can remember off the top of my head. Next story. My uncle is a firefighter in Florida, and I got to ride along with them for the day in the truck. We got 3 calls during the day. 1, a lady called saying she was too fat to get into her car. Upon arriving, she was in her car. 2, a guy called saying he saw a giant fireball in the trees in his backyard. There was no sign of any fire when we got there. 3, a lady called saying she was having a heart attack. She was not. Next story. I'm a commercial vehicle officer. A lot of my time is spent working way stations in my area. One day I heard a bolo, be on the lookout for, locate for a stolen tractor-trailer combination coming from a neighboring city over my radio. The guy stole it from a company yard, pushing another vehicle out of the way with his newly acquired Kenworth in the process of fleeing. He drove to another city to pick up a prostitute tweaker and headed back into my town, driving a truck he knew was reported stolen. He pulled into my open weigh station to get weighed, carrying stolen freight that came with the stolen truck. The guy went easy. His friend locked herself in the truck until local police arrived to take the arrest. I went to court over it, and the reaction from the grand jurors when I explained the situation to them was pretty good. Next story. I'm Border Patrol, and the absolute dumbest reason I've ever been called was a break-in on a house. Sounds reasonable, right? The house was 50 feet from the border and had footprints heading to the house, then back down south to Mexico. The only thing the aliens took was some packages this guy had. Fortunately, they left a couple behind, which totaled 101.4 pounds of marijuana. We arrested the idiot for felony possession when he said, "The least you can do is get the rest of my stuff." Next story. I'm an EMT and was listening to the police channel on the radio one night. We hear, "County to District X cars, we just had a female caller state there's a black male wearing a hoodie walking down her street. Unit on the road." Okay, what does she want us to do? Dispatch. No idea. My partner and I laughed for a good half hour over that one. Next story. I had a friend whose mom worked for the city. She would get complaints all the time for the dumbest things in the rich neighborhoods. She got a call for there being too much salt on the road in the wintertime. A signed petition from everyone in the neighborhood to get rid of a nearby car mechanic because they thought his shop was too trashy, even though he'd be in business there for 20 years before the development was built. Next story. Cop here. Dumbest reason for being called to a scene. Lady called and wanted us to tell her son to go to school. One of our stations had a carnival fundraiser and the street was closed. Someone called and complained there was a Ferris wheel obstructing traffic. Someone called in for theft from the city. The suspect was stealing recyclables from the trash can. Gas-powered leaf blower use is illegal. This is possibly the lowest priority on my list of things I don't care about. I'm sure there are more, but these are what came to mind. Next story. 911 dispatcher here, not an officer, but I once dispatched an officer to assist a subject whose cat was experiencing respiratory distress. The poor girl, teenager, was in tears, which only got worse when I told her that I couldn't send her a medic, which was what she was requesting. I felt so bad, and since the officer wasn't on anything, I told her I'd at least send him to see if he could do anything. Turns out, the cat was having a problem with its meds. It survived. I don't know why, but this story was very touching. The poor teenage girl in tears, the cat that's potentially collateral damage. I'm glad it all worked out and the cat was okay. Next story. Cop here. We have a guy in town who's paraplegic and confined to a wheelchair. He also has a totally abrasive personality and is an all-around awful person. The county pays for a caretaker, but he either fires them or they quit because they won't cater to his unreasonable demands. He called 911 once because his trash cans didn't get moved to the curb before trash day, and he wanted the police to come do it for him. The dispatcher routed me the call. I called in to dispatch and told them that I was absolutely not going out to put this guy's trash cans out. They ended up sending the fire department out after enough cops mutinied and refused to go. Next story. My neighbor hated my Mustang. He started calling the cops on me for drag racing. No, I'm accelerating to the speed limit of 45 from a stop sign. Anyway, he started calling the cops on me when it was a pickup truck, the UPS truck, the garbage man, etc. If he heard a V8, it had to be me. I spent a couple weeks in Germany. One night, my parents get a knock on the door. It's the police. They had reports of me drag racing again. My parents handed the officers my keys and said, "He's been out of the country for 2 weeks. You can go feel the engine if you want." The police apologized for disrupting my parents' evening. Next story. My dumbest call was a backup request from our fire department. 50-year-old, 400-pound guy had been calling the fire department a few times a day to let his dog out or bring him something like milk or the TV remote. They explained that they were regularly taking care of his dog by letting it out and picking up its poop. The fire department finally got pissed and started calling us to help. The guy used to be normal and then he got fat and started needing medicine so he wouldn't hurt. The medicine made him completely idle, so he got really fat and completely spaced out. I was going to arrest him for 911 abuse after I found out that he had 60 calls since the beginning of that year. Didn't have a big enough car, so I took a warrant and let someone else figure it out. Next story. My grandma was recovering from surgery in the hospital once. She had to share the room with this senile woman. I was really young, but this woman was so memorable. Whenever she needed something, hungry, bed raised, whatever, she would dial out to 911, like multiple times in an hour, because you call 911 for help. I guess eventually dispatch called the hospital and told the nurses station what was happening, and they had to go in there and talk to her about it. Hilarious, though. Next story. Not sure if I'm late to the party, but here you have it. As a cop, I get asked frequently about the most blank call I've ever taken. What's the scariest, the creepiest, the weirdest, the funniest, or the stupidest call I've ever taken? Over my 11-year career, with an additional 3 as a crime scene tech, I've seen a lot. When you think you've seen it all, you come to work the next day and get surprised again. Because of that, I usually have to pause for a while to try and remember what specific story I think they'd want to hear. When it comes to stupid calls, the list is extensive. There's the mother who called because her 6- and 8-year-old sons were fighting over Pokemon cards. There's the lady who called to report feral cats in her home, which turned out to be 2 kittens that were less than a month old. There's the guy who called to report that the ducks in the pond behind his home were snoring and keeping him awake. Admittedly, that was my top winner for a long time. But I feel like early last year, a new winner arose to accept the stupidest call I've ever been to. The call, which was initially reported by a third party, came out as a disorder in a parking lot. 2 men were outside of their vehicles, arguing with each other. Then, while I was on my way, one of the involved parties called and said that a person was blocking him in. That's not too uncommon. Many people make many bad decisions. I think blocking someone in is pretty high up there on the bad decision scale, but I've seen it. Someone takes your parking space, which really brings up the argument, what makes a parking space yours? Block them in. Did someone cut you off, tailgate you, merge into your lane, or do any other traffic movement that led you to feeling offended? Follow them until they park and block them in. Baby mama drama? Why not argue loudly outside and block her in so she can't leave before you have the chance to fully express how upset you are? Boss didn't pay you on time? Block his car in with yours until he pays you. It's sure to work, but see, what people don't realize is 2 things. The person being blocked in isn't really blocked in, because they could get out of their car and walk away. In fact, the aforementioned boss exited his car, went into his office, and called the police to report that he was being detained and kidnapped. The other thing that people frequently forget is that there are millions of guns in the U.S., a vast amount of them in my state alone, and the worst thing you can do to someone who's already emotional and angry is to corner them. It's much wiser to park elsewhere, not the plate, and call the police. or evaluate the situation in your head and decide whether it's really worth your time, effort, and frustration because they merged in front of you. Or maybe, just maybe, you could head home to your family, have a glass of wine, and watch the Modern Family marathon. But back to my call. As I'm driving, I'm speculating on the possible options I could be facing on my arrival. I pull into the parking lot. It's a grocery store parking lot with an L-shaped strip mall of the anchor store and numerous smaller businesses on each side, along with a gas station on the corner, a freestanding auto parts store, and a chain restaurant that serves pancakes of the international variety. The parking lot is sizable, with lanes adjacent to parking stalls, along with the access roads that run through the lot to allow ingress and egress. Fairly close to the center of the lot, I see them, a Corvette and a lifted pickup truck. It's what's basically a T-shaped intersection in the parking lot. The wider road, I use the term because I don't know what the drivey parts of parking lots are called, is running north-south, from the public roadway to the front of the storefronts. The smaller road tees off of that to the west, and eastbound cars have a stop sign. Now, understand that traffic law doesn't exist on private property, at least in my state or any state I've ever heard of. The only thing we enforce are DUI, reckless driving, or hit and run. That's it. Stop signs on private lots are merely suggestions. The Corvette is on the east-west roadway, facing east, about 15 feet back from the stop sign. The truck is primarily on the north-south roadway, in the midst of a right turn on the east-to-west. My first assumption is that it was a private property collision, and the drivers both got upset and started arguing. But as I exit my patrol car, neither seem to have damage. I contact the first driver of the truck. He tells me that he's headed toward the grocery store. He starts to turn right toward the parking area. His truck is so large and the roadway so small that in order to negotiate the turn, he takes up both lanes of traffic on the roadway he's turning onto. As he's turning, the driver of the Corvette comes up from the west and refuses to yield while he finishes his turn. He stops in the eastbound lane and refuses to back up. I clarify that there was no collision. I contact the driver of the Corvette. He tells me that he's trying to leave the lot. He's driving eastbound through the parking lot toward the larger road that takes him to the exit. As he approaches the stop sign, the driver of the truck comes whipping around the corner and into his lane. The driver of the truck refuses to yield to him and refuses to back up. I clarify that there was no collision. In speaking to them further, I learned that this hadn't just occurred either. The traffic snafu occurred, and initially both drivers remained in their cars, trying to win the Mexican standoff. Approximately 10 minutes later, yes, you read that right, the wife of the truck driver gets bored and exits the truck to enter the grocery store. Give or take 10 minutes after that, both drivers exit and begin to argue with each other over who needs to back up to yield to the other. At that point, someone called the police, and it took me just over 5 minutes to get there. So here we are, playing Billy Goat's Gruff for nearly 30 minutes. And to top it all off, neither vehicle was blocked in. Either driver could have reversed out of the situation and gone on their way, but that's not how you win a chicken measuring contest, now is it? Upon realizing that the only crime that was being committed was that both of these guys could possibly reproduce, I did the following. I clarified that absolutely no crime was being committed. I pointed out that the situation was so ridiculous that even the one guy's wife wanted out of it. I told them both that I've met kindergartners with more maturity and they deserved every minute of wasted time they were spending here, but I wouldn't be a part of it. I suggested that they should find reverse, unless they were too childish to understand how cars worked. Then I turned and laughed out loud all the way back to my patrol car. I left and got Starbucks. To this day, I still can't fathom two middle-aged men stopping in a parking lot for 30 minutes because each one felt they had a perceived right of way that doesn't even exist. Next story. Not a police officer, but I have a funny story. So, my dad likes a drink. One night, he goes round to his mate's house for a few while I go for a nap. A few hours pass and I'm woken up by my stepmother's blood-curdling screams. As you can imagine, the adrenaline began flowing because I had no effing idea what was happening. Turns out there's a madman trying to force himself into the house. The doorbell is constantly ringing and yelling is coming from the front door. He was apparently looking for my father to kick his ass. My stepmother, frightened as F, is simultaneously trying to comfort my younger siblings and call the police. If I hadn't still been in a bit of a daze from the nap, I would have known straight away. Turns out it was my drunk father in a super realistic old man mask trying to prank us. Anyway, I let him in, call him a F-head, and stepmom begins roasting the F out of him, all while the kids are in hysterics and have lost all trust in their father. Moments later, 3 police cars with sirens blaring rush into the house with guns drawn. My stepmother tells them what happened, and they weren't too impressed, although one did visibly giggle. They offered to take my beer-drenched father into custody overnight, but forgiving stepmom refused. Oh, and apparently all this triggered an anxiety disorder in my young sister. Good old dad. Next story. My sister called the cops on me when we were kids because I was mean to her. I was babysitting her and she wouldn't leave my room, literally like protesting, and wouldn't get off my bed. So I gave her a dead leg and she stormed off crying. Like 10 minutes later, she comes in running, begging for my forgiveness. Cops rang the doorbell a couple minutes later. The cops, my mother, and I were not amused. Next story. Best friend of mine is a state trooper. They have this little old lonely lady that calls and tells the dispatcher that there are aliens and demons in her house and needs help. When the troopers respond, they check the house and sometimes yell that whatever is there has to leave. For this service, she gives them a huge box of cookies. They bicker with each other as to who gets to go that day. This happens at least twice a month. Next story. I'm a security guard and I found a homeless 300-plus pound woman with gorilla hands with a backpack full of 40s and a chicken on a leash trying to sleep in a McDonald's parking space. She kept calling me a pervert rent-a-cop. I had a tear of joy because she called me a cop. It made me feel less like a loser. Her chicken seemed very well behaved. True story. Next story. Retired LEO here. About once a month, we had an old lady call us out to search her attic or backyard because she, quote, could smell people having sex there. It became so routine that the SOP was to spend a few minutes shining the flashlight around and looking concerned. Also had another one who believed her washer and dryer were demon-possessed. She really did believe this. She could hear them talk crap about her. She'd call every few months. SOP was to look behind, inside, and around the dryer, looking concerned and trying to reason with the ghost. I finally got fed up with it and yelled at the ghost to get the F out of here and never come back. Seems to have worked. Had to help the fire department unsuction an obese lady out of a bathtub. She was literally suctioned in there. FTO asked me if I had ever seen a color TV. I said, yeah, of course. I thought he said color TV, so we go to a call at the local Stab and Jab motel, and the complainant, who was a 6'5", 130-pound black man, answered. He was in a blonde wig, full drag, and wearing lipstick and red pumps. He complained that the men in his room, about 5 of them, promised him crack if he let them F him. He was mad because he never got his crack. I crap you not. True story. Disturbance call with an irate husband. Arrived to see him rapidly walking down the street, approaching the squad car with wife running behind him, in a populated neighborhood, with a big, long, floppy dildo waving around screaming, "Is this who you cheated on me with, you whore?" A Mexican midget, male, sorry, little person, wanted to file SA charges against a man for SAing him in the workspace. Domino's Pizza. Security footage showed that it was consensual. Not dumb, but really weird and hilarious. Guy called to report suspicious activity and possible burglary next door. When I arrived, he had a joint behind his ear. Normally I wouldn't care too much, but you gotta at least try, man. I mean, come on. Lady ties and calls to say her husband beat the crap out of her again. Here's where the dumb/sad part is. Now, I'd arrested him before for DV a couple of times, and he swore up and down he never touched her, but was in the bar down the street. Earlier that day, I pissed off my supervisor and was put on foot patrol in the neighborhood. Walking down the street on the sidewalk, I saw this lady beating herself in the face with a chair. Literally. I call my supervisor and he gets there, and we're both on the street watching this lady go WWE Raw on herself with this chair. We then left and checked the bar, and sure enough, hubby was in there drinking and minding his business. She calls 15 minutes later, saying hubby beat her up again. I arrested her for filing a false report, by the way. Poor guy was telling the truth the whole time. Got so many tales like this, it isn't even funny. Yes, the list goes on, but I think you get the point, and it answers OP's question, I think. Love, peace, and chicken grease, y'all. Next story. There are quite a few, but here's a recent one from the last block. Get called to a neighbor dispute over barking dogs. Speak to the complainant who says his neighbor lets her dogs out a few times a day to do their business, and they yap for a few minutes before being let back in. He says he's reported it to animal services and by law, but they're taking too long. He feels this is harassment because he has a 5-month-old baby who sleeps during the day. I tell him that based on this info, it doesn't seem unreasonable, but I will talk to his neighbor. Talk to her and she loses it, saying that she's been harassing her for months. He's taken out a portion of the fence to enable her dogs to escape. He walks back and forth along the fence line every time she and her disabled 18-year-old daughter are outside creeping them out. He's been recording them by cell phone every time she lets out her dogs. And finally, he yells and bangs in his walls every time she has company over. On top of that, I meet the dogs and they're quite well behaved. Also, she has months of records with dates and times of his weird behavior. Basically, I end up going back to the first guy and cautioning him that he could face charges of criminal harassment if the behavior continues or escalates. I'll probably be back again next week. Next story. I'm not a police officer, but one time my friends and I, around 18 years old at the time, had the cops called on us for fishing on a nice suburban neighborhood lake. Some HOA lady spotted us, marched around the lake to us, and barked about how we were trespassing and she was calling the police. We politely offered to leave and ran into the responding officers as they were arriving. Officer number 1 stayed with us while officer number 2 went to talk the HOA lady down. Officer number 1 laughed about the whole situation and talked with us about how terrible HOAs are. Officer 2 managed to convince HOA lady not to try to charge us with trespassing, and we left after thanking the officers. Some people just think the police are their personal strong arm. Is that just like a prerequisite to be on a HOA board? You just have to be a stingy, nosy, miserable human being? Like, we've seen too many stories like this on this channel from HOA people, just saying. Next story. Worked as a police officer for 5 years. Just got out last year, thank God. Any hoosers, it was a Friday, 3rd shift. A lady is moving into a house and she's drunk as crap. Apparently, she called because she thinks someone stole her cell phone and wallet and purse with cash in it. Go to the house and realize that it's a frequent flyer from the nearby mid-sized city. She tells me the make of the phone and the number. No idea about the cash or the purse. Dispatch comes back with the same number, so she called to report her cell phone stolen was the one she called to report with. I had dispatch call the phone. It was right on top of the kitchen counter. Just for our record, I asked for her ID. Lo and behold, it's in her purse. I see a purse looped over the back door in the kitchen and ask her if that was it. She says yes, and that can I grab it and look for her ID in it. I open the bag, and in there's the biggest, stickiest ditch weed Bob Marley joint I've ever seen. At this point, I'm about to laugh my ass off. Partner and I decide to just flush it and tell her yada yada yada, bite out of crime, we're watching, and to not use 911 for your crap. 10 to 8, no report. Found lost crap. Head to breakfast, scrambled eggs and biscuits and gravy. The next night, she ended up in lockup because she tried buying weed from an undercover vice in the nearby city. She moved away the next week. Next story. Tangentially related, did a coup at my city's fire department. They told me a story about how the local animal shelter people called them about going to help a ghost who had his leg stuck in the ice on a frozen river. It wasn't a busy day, so they ride out there, hop a fence, suit up in ice water rescue gear, start making their way to the ice, and the goose flies away. Next story. Firefighter friend has his fire station respond to a woman choking. They get to the apartment and a guy answers the door in his underwear. The man says, "They're back here." Puzzled, the firemen go to the back bedroom where a woman was apparently stuck giving a guy head. Apparently, he had a piercing and she had big tonsils, and his piercing got stuck on said tonsils. They tried in vain to get them unstuck, but in the end, they had to be laid in a large double stretcher 69 position and taken to a hospital to be properly separated. This sounds weird and extremely painful, like I was cringing the whole time reading that. My goodness, the things that people get themselves into. Next story. I used to work at a full-service gas station, and this lady's gas door fell off. So I informed her of this fact and went about my business. When she was finished fueling, she went and parked, which was not unusual. About 10 minutes later, the cops come along to have a chat with me about damaging a customer's car, and I was perplexed until the lady comes running inside and just starts shrieking at me about the stupid gas door. Once she calmed down and the cop figured out what the actual problem was, he was pretty cool about it and let me go without any hassle, and he dealt with the lady himself. Next story. Once I was sitting in my car outside my friend's house waiting for him to get home, since he was running late with whatever he was doing. It couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. Neighbors outside were eyeing me weird and waited around in their truck in the driveway. Out of nowhere, 2 squad cars show up, blocking both sides of my car, and start interrogating me. Turns out, the neighbors claimed I was a child SAer trying to entice their children into my car. When the police got there, the neighbors zoomed away as if they did God's work. I was just sitting there using Duolingo on my phone. I didn't have my license on me, and the car was still registered under my in-laws' name at the time. But I happened to have my passport on me, just recently lost my wallet. After a few questions, they were cool, and one of the officers even started talking about video games with me while I was waiting for my passport. TLDR, sitting in your car too long makes you a predator. Next story. I'm a bit late to this party, but once I got a call that the driver was upset because the passenger was laughing at her. I took it as beat information and did not respond to the scene. Another time, someone called in a live tiger wandering in the shoulder of the freeway. I was unable to find said tiger. Next story. Okay, not a copper, but I've had to call them this shift for one stupid but valid incident. Here's how it played out for my partner and I. Dispatch. House XYZ, send medical to any street, USA. Complaints of belligerent individual roaming the street. Individual may have contagious illnesses. Us. Truck 405 en route. Note time 12:34. 5 minutes pass. Dispatch. Truck 405, what's your ETA to call? Complaints. More people calling. Original callers were family calling EMS over PD. Now state individuals naked and stating she's going to give it to all OU. Me to partner when we get to a road stop. We'll see how far PD is out. Partner. Okay. Us. Dispatch, we're 2 minutes out. Location is just on the boundaries of our service zone. We arrived and stopped at the end of the road to observe our situation. We're looking to see if our scene is safe and we can operate in the area unhindered. It's just turning dark at 8, flipping a clock, and we're looking pretty intensely, when all of a sudden, bam, right on the hood of our rig is a stark naked woman screaming at the top of her lungs, "Y'all mother effers gonna get this crap too." She's licking the windows and spitting and touching herself while rubbing it on the ambulance. Us. Dispatch, truck 405 here. We've encountered the individual from the complaints. She's telling us she's going to infect us just like she was. Request ETA on PD or SO for containment because we're trapped in the bus. Dispatch, no officers en route due to other incidents. Please advise if you're unable to control the situation. Us. Dispatch, we're unwilling to control the situation due to possible biological issues. Please advise. Dispatch. ETA of SO on mutual aid 10 minutes. Us. Affirmative. Truck 405 silent for SO response. My partner and I actually played 20 questions while we waited for backup. SO dispatch. SO 100 on scene to any street USA. Note, one white female, possibly mid-30s, humping the hood of Unit 405? This part was hysterical because it actually sounded in question form, as if he wasn't sure or not. Attempting to make contact with non-lethal at ready. Please keep clear till I advise situation. All is quiet. Officer Do-Right is heard through the cracks in our windows. Ma'am, why don't you get down from there? Lady, F you toothpick-looking little jerk. I'll make you sick too. You're nothing to me. SO, ma'am, I'm only going to ask you one time to comply. Then I'll have to. Lady, sick your puppy on me? I'll give it rabies. SO, no, ma'am, I'll be forced to tase you. Lady, okay, getting down. She laid on the road while cuffed. We began our treatment. I asked her what was so bad that she had to give it to everyone, and she told me she got crabs from her boyfriend. Yes, all this over bloody lice and too much alcohol. Not an actual issue. So far, it's the highlight of this shift. Next story. So we have a strip of bars where I work, where every weekend they shut down 2 roads these bars are on, and it's foot traffic only. In order to deal with the drunks, we amp up the police presence and make ourselves seen. We patrol on foot, bikes, and a mounted unit, horses. So one night it's 2 a.m., and I'm out patrolling these bars, and we get called to a fight between 2 girls. I run around the corner and up the road and find I'm like the sixth or seventh copper there. I look around and no one's doing anything. Then I see two girls fighting. Still, no one's doing anything. I say, "Sarge, what's going on?" Before I can spit out the last word, he puts up his hand and says, "Just watch." Then I look at the two chicks. One bends down and grabs a handful of horse manure and smashes it in the other girl's face and hair. Sarge says that's the third time they've done that. We let them finish their fight. When they got tired, we let them go unconditionally. Next story. There was a cops episode where they're called out for a domestic dispute in a trailer park. The cops get there, and the reason the girlfriend called them was because her boyfriend threw a hamburger at her. There was also this conversation. "Ma'am, is that blood on your hand?" And the girlfriend looks at her hand. "Oh no, that's just barbecue sauce." She didn't lick the barbecue sauce off her hand. Next story. Not a police officer, but I did place a call when I was young. I was 4 or 5 at the time, living with my mother in a townhouse in Texas. Since I was at that age that most people learn to communicate consciously with people, my mom wanted to teach me how to dial 911 should there ever be an emergency and she was unable to answer the phone. She stressed that it was only to be used on emergencies, and that even if I was scared, to always know how to say our address. She had this strange notion that being a single mother in a big house, we were prone to a break-in at some point. So fast forward a couple days, and I wanted to watch some Looney Tunes VHS in my room. It was my favorite. The Flight of the Valkyries episode featuring Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny done in opera. I think at this point I was loading in the cassette, but I lacked the knowledge to set the correct channel and use the controller. The cassette was working, music was playing, and I could hear the characters, but the TV was on the wrong input and would only play sounds. In my panic, I rushed to my mother, but she's in the shower and she can't hear my little fist beating on the wood. Now, with all the logic that a toddler can muster, I probably thought she was ignoring me or was hurt. So I waddle to the phone receiver and dial 911. I'm told by my mom that I screamed into the phone my address and that there is a big emergency, that Bugs Bunny wouldn't come on and my mother was ignoring me. The operator laughed and told me to knock on the door again. I opened the door, it wasn't locked, and run in, handing the laughing operator to my mother. The operator asked if everything was okay and explained the nature of my call, and my mom was so embarrassed. Of course, she still reminds me of this to this day. TLDR, Elmer Fudd shot Bugs Bunny and nobody helped me, so I called 911. Next story, multiple person fight with bats. It was actually a couple of 15-year-olds fighting with baguettes. They'd purchased all the reduced baguettes from the nearby shop and obviously decided to have a baguette fight. That was a fun one to update control about. Slow down, other units. No bats, only baguettes. Next story. I called the cops on myself dumbly once. This is actually the craziest story that I've collected in my short 26 years of being alive. This was St. Patrick's Day. I was 22, I think, drunk downtown, going to meet some friends between bars. I saw a guy in a sports team hat, of which I was wearing the same team's hat. So I, being my drunken happy self, called out to him, "Hey man, let's go, sports team." And this effing a-hole whirls around from the bike chain that he was yanking on as hard as he could and screams at me, "I will murder your effing family," like a effing loony. So I buzz off immediately and sit a short distance away and watch him effing yanking on his bike chain, and it clicks that he must have been so confrontational because he's a bike thief doing his thing. Well, I decide to call the cops and report. A white male in gray sweatshirt and jeans wearing a sports team hat. At any rate, the bike thief had the bike unlocked at this point and calmly walked it just down the street, chained it up at the next bar down, and apparently wasn't stealing the bike at all. Just then, I'm still on my phone with the dispatcher describing this as it's happening when a squad car pulls up. Now the officers were looking for a white male in a gray sweatshirt, jeans, and a sports team hat. A description that I happen to match to a T. An officer yells at me to put the phone away. I drunkenly protest, saying, "Wait, but I'm on the phone with you guys." To which he yells at me once again, "Put the phone away." To which I immediately comply. So the cop asks me if I've been drinking. Yes, I have. I'm not trying to fool anyone. People are watching me get interrogated by the police. They had their lights on. It was quite a scene. And they pretty quickly figure out that I am indeed the guy that called them. So when I tell them that the other guy went into that bar over there, and that's the bike that I thought he was stealing, because of his insanely hostile reaction, it sounds a little odd, I'm sure, but nothing crazier than what they've surely experienced on the job. So one of the cops goes into the bar and finds the guy because I'm able to describe him because his hat was a very bright, vivid color of the sports team that we're both fans of. So I see the lunatic getting questioned over there, and the cop who's with me is calmly asking me what I was up to. He sees that I'm scared and pretty innocent and just drunk downtown. And we got to talking about yet another sports team, the local hockey team, who happened to be in the playoffs that year. Anyways, they find out the guy's bike is his bike, and they tell me to just stay away from the guy because they have no way of knowing if he actually threatened to murder my family or not. And at any rate, both of us were pretty drunk. Anyways, about a week later, I'm at this girl's house when I see this very oddly noticeable sports team hat on the counter. I ask her whose hat that is, and she says it was her friend Jimmy's. Don't remember his actual name. This will do. Hat. I ask why it's at her house, and she says he's her roommate's friend and left the hat with her roommate when he got tossed in jail a week ago. This gets a, wait, WTF did you say? From me, and I get the story. Apparently on St. Patrick's Day, this guy was arrested from the very bar that I saw him go into before calling the cops on myself for starting multiple fights and overall getting way too drunk and aggressive with multiple people. So I did the only logical thing you can do in such a situation. I took this mother effer's hat for threatening to murder my family. That hat is still sitting at my parents' house today, a vivid green Oakland Athletics hat.